Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, Your Identity, Your Number One Career Success Factor. My name is Dan Gardner, and I'm a member of the Career Programs team here in the Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is sponsored by BU Alumni Relations as part of our 2019 Alumni Career Weeks series, and it's offered to our 335,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. I know that we have alumni joining us today from faraway places like Dublin, Ireland, Beijing, China, Beirut, Lebanon, Oakland, California, Denver, Colorado, Atlanta, Georgia, Woodbridge, Virginia, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Belmont, Bedford, Upton, Falmouth, and many more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know, this webinar is being hosted on our Zoom online meeting platform, and if you experience any technical difficulties with the audio or visual portion of the presentation, please contact Zoom support at 1-888-799-9666. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website found at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A box, and you can find it by hovering over either the top or bottom of your screen and selecting Q&A. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, BU College of Communication alumnus, Larry Ackerman. A leading authority on organizational and personal identity, Larry is the founder and president of the Identity Circle, LLC. It's a consulting and coaching firm based in Westport, Connecticut. His clients have included AARP, Dow Chemical, Fidelity Investments, Lockheed Martin, Maytag, National Geographic, and State Farm Insurance. Larry is the author of 2 groundbreaking books on identity, Identity as Destiny, Leadership and the Roots of Value Creation, and The Identity Code, the 8 essential questions for finding your purpose and place in the world. Larry has been a guest lecturer at the Yale School of Management, Chicago's Booth School of Business, Wharton, Pepperdine, and the UCLA Anderson School. We are thrilled to welcome him back to BU for this webinar. And Larry, thanks again for being here. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dan. You did a great job. I appreciate that. And it's great to be with all of you today. I am a big fan of BU and higher ed generally, and so it's a pleasure. In fact, it's an honor for me to do this. So thanks again for coming over here. The idea of identity today, you probably realize, is all over the news and in all kinds of forms: identity politics, gender identity. There's no lack of conversation around identity these days. And what I'm hoping to do in this particular session is to offer you a definition of identity and how it affects your life that will make sense, that will resonate with you, and that is one that you can carry with you going forward. So this is a conversation about why your identity matters and what it means for your career. And with that, let's get started. So what is the career challenge these days? A couple of quotes. That building engagement is about unleashing individual strengths rather than trying to fit people into specific molds. I think this particular quote from Blessing White, the consulting firm, says a huge amount about what employers are looking for. Not just filling the skills gap, but finding people whose strengths will make a difference in how they run their businesses. Another quote from the New York Times: what we learn from high achievers is that challenging our assumptions, and at times even our goals, may sometimes push us further than we thought possible. So the idea of pushing ourselves further is also relevant these days. Not just accepting the fact that good is good enough, but striving for something that's meaningful to you as well as to your employer. And finally, from Harvard Business Review, What talented people want has changed. They used to want high salaries and stable career paths, and now they want purposeful work. And that means jobs that are part of an ongoing career journey, wherein that purpose gets satisfied over and over again as you mature in your work and as you grow and as you make contributions over the course of your career. So, I know that's a startling image, but I'm going to explain why it's here. One of the questions that I'm often asked is, how did you get into this field of identity consulting and identity coaching? And it's important that you know that my experience is not based on looking at identity as some academic pursuit or simply some professional experience. The reason I got into this is because of very personal experience. When I was a child, when I was 4 years old, my parents put me into the hospital because I had been born cross-eyed. And I was struggling to see, as most normal people do, in stereo-optic vision. So my parents tried to explain what was going on, and of course, there's only so much a 4-year-old can understand. But I remember the experience quite clearly. I remember being rolled into the operating room and having canvas straps put across my chest and my pelvis, and looking around, watching the operating theater come to life with the surgeon and the nurses and the attendants and the light coming on, and not knowing what was going on. And as you can imagine, I was panicking. I was looking around for my parents, in particular my father, and neither was there because parents were not allowed into operating rooms at that time. And so at a certain point, I actually thought I was going to die. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know what I had done wrong. And at a certain moment, I asked myself a question inside. And the question is, what is so wrong with me that I must be changed from who I am? And in that moment, basically, everything went dark. And yet I had a sense of being alive, a consciousness about my own life that was startling. Ever since that experience in the hospital, identity has been the governing force in my life. And that's what brings me to this work. So what's my identity? Here we have 4 pretty famous faces. We have obviously Barack Obama. We have Peyton Manning. We have Mary Kay Ash, lower right, founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics. And of course, we have Martha Stewart. And the question is, can you possibly tell what the identity of these individuals is simply by looking at them? You can tell their image, you can describe their faces, you might be able to discern something about their personalities, but there's no way that you can know who they are at their core. It is simply not possible. So then, what is it I mean by identity? And here's the definition I would like to share with you. And that is that identity is the unique combination of characteristics that reveals your potential for making a distinctive contribution in the world. And as you can see, there are 3 bolded words here: unique, potential, and contribution. The 3 defining qualities of identity are in fact these: the notion of uniqueness, which is the fact that there is only one of you. Literally, there is only one of you in this world. Potential, that identity is not simply about today, it's about the future. It's about what you can contribute going forward. It's about what's possible. And finally, constancy, the idea that who you are never changes, but how you express yourself can change infinitely. And that last point, by the way, is probably the most controversial of my work, the notion of constancy. It's like changing from a changeless foundation. The seeds of your identity are planted at conception. They grow, nurture, develop, and express themselves over the course of your life. But who you are will not change. How you express yourself can and should change many, many times to stay fresh and to stay relevant. So, a bit of a paradox, and very, very important to how you might want to think about identity going forward. So one of the questions that I have dealt with, certainly with my corporate clients, is this: hey, does identity really work? You know, what is this stuff all about? So a couple of years ago, we conducted a quantitative survey. No, actually not a survey. It was a study based on psychometric analysis, not an attitude study. It's a one-year effort. We had about 1,900 respondents. As you can see, we had 5 companies, different in sizes from 50 million to 9 billion, global, domestic, public, private, B2B, and consumer. And the question is, can we see any correlation whatsoever between identity strength in an organization and employee engagement, and by extension, performance? And I was thrilled and relieved when I discovered through our research firm whom we hired that organizational and individual identity strength have a major impact on employee engagement and by extension business performance. So it was a pretty high corollary of 6.86, and it just led to a bevy of media and conversations with clients who said that makes sense, and now I can see how it works and why it works. So with that, I want to get into the thick of our presentation, of our conversation. And that is, what we're going to do is talk about these 8 essential questions and how each affects career development. These are the 8 essential questions Dan mentioned when he mentioned my second book, The 8 Essential Questions for Finding Your Purpose and Place in the World, which is the subtitle to the Identity Code. So here we go, 8 essential questions. The first question is, not surprisingly, who am I? And if we were together in a room, in a workshop, I would be inviting you all to participate in an open dialogue about that question. I'd love to ask you, what does that question mean to you? What does it bring to mind? What images come to mind? You look at this picture and you say, in the context of who am I, you know, well, it's hard to know, because here we are, probably one happy family or group of friends or a couple of families, where the whole notion is our relationships very often tend to define who we are. I'm a member of this family, I'm a member of this group, I'm a member of BU, I'm a member of whatever. But the way to answer the question, who am I, is different. And I'm going to share that with you now. The way you answer the question is by defining yourself as separate from all others, as separate, as distinct from everybody else. And that sounds a little crazy. It sounds like, well, Larry, are you advocating that, you know, I live a hermit's life? Clearly not. But I am suggesting that if you really want to know who you are at your core, you need to create some space, if you will, in your mind and your heart, so that you're focusing just on you and not on your relationship to others, parents, siblings, wife, other, you know, husbands, whatever. So defining yourself as separate from all others is the place to begin your identity journey. And the career corollary is this: that what you do is not who you are. You are not your labels. You are simply you. What you do is not who you are. You're not your labels. You are simply you. And the first order of business is to figure out who you are. Then the good news is you can bring yourself back into those relationships that matter in ways that will make those relationships stronger, more resilient, and more meaningful, not just to you, but to the other people as well. Everybody is clear now. Everything is not jumbled. There's clarity, there's opportunity. It's a whole new way to engage with the people who matter to you in your life. The second question is, what makes me special? And here, again, I would invite you all to think about that question. What does it mean? What are we getting at here? The way to answer that question is by unearthing what you love. Now, what I'm not talking about is the fact that you might love, let's say, skiing or cooking or fishing or whatever. I'm suggesting that what you love lies deep beneath those particular activities that indeed you like, but that hold the keys to understanding yourself more deeply and what you're really, really good at. So what makes you special begins by unearthing what you love. And the career corollary to that is that you have what I call innate capacities that distinguish you. These capacities constitute what I call your identity muscles, and here are 3 examples of them. You have a genius for discovery, perhaps you have a passion for change, perhaps you have an instinct for harmony. Once you crack the code on these particular capacities, from a career perspective, you now have a better understanding of what you can bring into a job, into an organization, and how that organization will benefit from your participating in it. The interesting way to get to these is, however, by first starting to identify those activities that you love. As I said, skiing, hiking, whatever they may be, and asking yourself 3 questions. Why do I love skiing? And then you're going to come up with some answers to that. And you're going to ask yourself then, well, why do I love what I just said I loved? And then one more time. So you ask yourself why 3 times, and suddenly you begin to understand deeper, more significant elements of who you are. So skiing isn't just about skiing. Perhaps it's about harmony with nature. You don't know. But once you crack the code on this, you go, wow, I've never seen that before, but it's always been there. So one of the approaches that I take is to make unconscious knowledge conscious. You have all the answers. My job is simply to help you get there. And these muscles, these identity muscles, these capacities are most valuable when they're being exercised in the context of work. This is where you will have a clear understanding of how you can create value in your job. Third question is there a pattern to my life? And very often, again, when I'm in workshops or when I've done lecturing at some of the business schools, I've had people, wrestle with the question and try to identify what we're talking about, patterns. And, some people will say, well, I've been, I've been divorced 3 times. Or somebody else will say something that also sounds kind of negative. And I don't know, I still haven't figured out why that is, but the pattern that I'm talking about is anything but negative. It is hugely positive and very, very powerful. And the way to unearth this pattern, to clarify this pattern, is by making the connections that explain past events and foreshadow your future. If you were to sit down and take a pencil or a pen or whatever, a piece of paper, and write down 7 or 8 or 9 milestones of your life from the time you were a child, the things that really made a difference to you, not necessarily to your parents or your teachers or your friends or anyone else, just to you. If you were to write those down and look at them together, I will guarantee you, you will see a pattern. That there's been something going on in your life that is very, very powerful and that further explains what you're really good at and what you love. And when that happens, you say, well, that's interesting. I've connected it's like connect the dots. When you're a kid, you play connect the dots. You say, oh, then that must mean that going forward, I can use this pattern, if you will, in a constructive way. I can bring that into the work that I do in the world, to my employer, to my career, because now I understand that particular strength more clearly. So the pattern of your life reveals a theme that explains how you create value as an individual. And here are 3 examples. So one example of such a pattern is resourceful creativity. When you do this exercise I just described to you, writing down 7 or 8 or 9 of these milestones, these achievements, if you will, in your life, you look at them, the discipline is, how can I articulate a pattern in 2 words that captures what I'm seeing on this page? Another idea is soulful efficiency. Another is courageous resilience. And let me just focus on the middle one for a moment, because there's something really powerful about this. This is a person I've worked with extensively, and her pattern, as she articulated, is this. And if you look at it, you go, well, that's interesting, because it's kind of paradoxical. You know, you have soulful, which is obviously a very human, spiritual experience, and efficiency, which is a clearly practical, applied experience. But when you marry the 2 together, it creates an even greater, more powerful idea. Soulful efficiency. So whatever she does in ways that bring about practical outcomes, she does it in a way that is a soulful, thoughtful, compassionate method. That's her pattern. That's her life pattern, if you will. And you can use this theme as a way to gauge career opportunities and job compatibility. So if you're going into a job interview or you're considering a company, you can ask yourself, do you think this company is going to appreciate me in this context? Will they appreciate my courageous resilience? Will I be able to exercise that capacity within this new job? Because folks, if you cannot do this, you're going into the wrong job. This is the identity discipline at work. This is saying, once you understand those unique capacities, once you understand the pattern of value creation that yields this theme, you're now in a position to make much clearer choices. And it's not just, it's not about choices only, it's also about responsibility to yourself and responsibility to others to make decisions that are going to benefit everybody. So the 4th question then is, where am I going? Which is a typical career question. I know I've been through it several times. And again, when you think about the question, where am I going? Clearly we're not talking about where I'm going geographically. We're talking about, where am I going in my life? What am I doing? Where am I heading? And I remember I work in the city a lot, in New York City, and I can walk down the street at any given moment and watch people coming, passing people. And I'm willing to bet that half the people I pass on the street are asking themselves this question at any given moment. Where am I going? Yeah, I'm going to a meeting, or I'm going to go meet somebody for lunch, or I'm going to go catch a train, but where am I going? It's like going everywhere and getting nowhere. So where am I going is the 4th question. And the way to answer that question is to commit to the path revealed in what you have learned so far. And what you've learned so far is your innate capacities, passion for harmony or discovery, whatever those are for you. That's part of what you have learned, the 4 of them, 3 of them, 5 of them, whatever they are, plus the value creation theme we just talked about. So you have to commit to the path revealed that in those particular strengths, what they offer you. The career corollary is that at times of uncertainty and doubt, we can remind ourselves what our special strengths are, our innate capacities and our value creation theme, and work to make the most of them every day. So there's a moment in the development and discovery of one's identity where you're going to hit a wall. You're going to say, well, I'm not sure what this all adds up to. Maybe this is too much. Maybe I should quit. Life was okay the way it was, and this is too hard. And so I'm just going to, pretend it never happened. That's a bad choice. But at that moment of uncertainty and doubt, you've already got certain assets to work with. And there's no reason you shouldn't use them to great effect every day in your current job, in looking for a job, in wherever you happen to be. It's part of developing a career that's going to be meaningful to you and, of course, as I say, to your employer. The fifth question is, what is my gift? And we all know this gentleman, and I think we can agree he had a gift. Yes, disruptive technologies can change the world. Read Moving at the Speed of Creativity. I do, and I love the podcast. It's funny. Okay. In any event, what is my gift? This is like having reached the summit of a mountain. Okay, the question is really, gift is the same as identity. What is my gift to the world? What have I got to give to others that is going to be meaningful to them and meaningful to me? And the way to answer that question is by following the signs of joy. There's so much written about the power of joy. And it's not about happiness. It's something deeper, more resonant, and more permanent. And you follow the signs of joy, you're going to see what it is. You're going to discover who you are, what you love, what you're good at, how it all adds up, and what implicitly is your gift. So the career corollary is that your identity is your gift to the world. I cannot stress that enough. Your identity, who you are at your core, is what you have to give to the world, whether that's to your spouse, your child, your employer, the people who worked for you, the people who work with you. Your identity is your center of gravity. So the way to express it is by saying, for example, I feel most alive when I am, fill in the blank, helping people to see, inspiring renewal, teaching the art and science of personal evolution. The first one happens to be me. This is my identity. This is why I am here. This is how I live. It's how I express myself, is by helping people to see. And I do that with companies as well as with individuals. Inspiring renewal, a wonderful expression by a former client, and teaching the art and science of personal evolution, which may sound, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, it really is less important that you understand it than the person who articulated it for themselves. They understand it deeply and they know how to apply it. And the same would go for you. Whatever your identity statement is, has to resonate principally with you. And then others will experience it. They don't necessarily have to understand it. So aligning what you do with who you are is the surest way to find a career and a job that will best serve you as well as your employer. Aligning what you do with who you are is the surest way to find a career that will best serve you and your employer. So when I go into companies, when I am talking to a prospective client, I actually ask myself, will they appreciate my drive to help people to see, my ability to ask questions and discern ideas and information and craft insights that will be meaningful to them? Because some clients will not. Some clients, frankly, would prefer a more conventional, quantitative approach to solving a problem, and that's fine, but that's not me. That's not how I would run the team. So again, it comes down to alignment and to fit and to choice and to seeing in a way that will give you the best chance to make the best choices over the course of your career. The sixth question is, who can I trust? And that's always, it's always a great question. to put in front of an audience. And again, the question I ask is to you guys, well, what does that mean to you? What does that question bring to mind? Who can I trust? And I will never forget when I was doing a workshop, a lecture at Wharton, actually, with a big section of, they must have had about 80 or 90 MBAs in this section. And I brought up this question, just like I did here. And I invited folks to respond. What does the question mean to you? And after a lot of bantering and people going back and forth, there was a gentleman in the very back row who raised his hand, and he said to the group, not to me, but kind of like everybody, he said, "I'm not sure I even trust myself." And of course, that started a stampede of people going, "Oh, that's not right. Why do you say that?" So on and so forth. But the question of who can I trust is clearly an important one. So the way to answer the question is by taking stock of who matters and why. Who in your relationship universe, if you will, who really matters and why do they matter? Because not everybody does at the same level of significance. There are different levels of trust to consider. For example, who can I trust to paint my house and do a good job? That's one level of trust. But when you take it a level deeper, you can say, well, who can I trust to babysit my kids Saturday night so my spouse and I can go out and relax for a few hours? That takes trust to another level. And below that yet, there's another level which says, well, who can I trust to take care of my ailing parents when I'm not around? And that, deepens the significance of who you can trust. And there's a level, in my view, even below that. And that is, who can I trust will want what I have to give? Who will trust me most deeply and will invite me into their world, whether it's a job, a relationship, whatever? Who will want what I have to give? And in turn, whose identity, whose gift to the world will I want in return? So the career corollary is, in fact, to answer this question, who will want what you have to give? But this obviously is in the context of assessing potential fit with a prospective employer. This is the central question if you have the chance to keep in the front of your mind when you're either interviewing for a job or seeking a promotion. Will this allow me to express myself fully or mostly? Or will it hinder me? Or will I have to shift myself in order to, do what must be done in this job? It's the worst thing you can do. Yes, there's some flexibility around the edges, but ladies and gentlemen, staying true to yourself is the only way to maintain integrity in your life, to be able to sleep at night. So who will want what you have to give? So using that identity, your identity as a lens for assessing fit, is so important. The seventh question is, what is my message? And here we're going to slide into a conversation that you've probably had before. And that is, you'll see in just a moment, having to do with your personal brand. The way to understand your message, to clarify your message, is to declare yourself on the strength of your gift. In essence, stand up and be counted for who you are. Don't equivocate. Don't be afraid. Let people know who you are. Let people know your particular strengths, what you're good at, your capacities, how you create value in the world, what your gift is. It is an extraordinarily powerful experience to do this. And I have rarely, if ever, seen an audience, so to speak, turn away from such an assertion, such a declaration. It's rare enough in this world, but when you can do it clearly and with the right information, talk about charisma. This is a charisma building moment. The career corollary is to make your identity the foundation of your personal brand. And I'm sure you've all talked about or heard about personal branding. It's a big deal these days. And just before we go into the next step on this, I want to reprise the definition of identity. That is the unique combination of characteristics that reveals your potential for making a distinctive contribution in the world. So, make your identity the foundation of your personal brand and weave that brand into all aspects of your career, into the job you're doing, into the relationships you have at work, into how you approach leadership if you're in a leadership position or you're aspiring to be a leader. How does this identity of yours inform that approach? How might it inform that approach? And if you're in the market for a new job, let all of this inform your job search, your resume, cover letter, your LinkedIn profile, your elevator pitch, your interview questions. That entire portfolio of job search assets can be and should be informed by your identity. And it will bring incredible clarity and precision to the search and to the conversations that you will have with prospective employers. So the eighth and final question is, will my life be rich? And as you can see from this image, I believe that a rich life is all about the roots. It's all about the foundation from which that life is born. It's all about your identity. And how do you get there? You develop a rich life by surrendering, if you will, to the pull of identity. And I don't mean surrendering, of course, as in throwing in the towel or giving up. I mean it quite the opposite. I mean allowing yourself to embrace who you are. Slowly, a little at a time, until it builds up to the point where there's critical mass. And your identity is suddenly a centerpiece, if not the centerpiece, of how you develop your career and how you do the work you do in the world. The corollary for careers is that your identity is about creating value for others, which in turn gives your work and your life greater impact and meaning. So what do? Next, you clarify what rich means to you. And yes, money is very important, but money is not exclusively important. You guys all know that rich can mean many, many things. It can mean recognition. It can mean love. It can mean sleeping well at night. It can mean that sense of extraordinary satisfaction you get by helping others or by doing a phenomenal job for which you get great recognition. And develop an identity integration plan. Look at your life, look at your work, look at your job, whatever, and bring your identity into it consciously and conscientiously, a little at a time, and see what happens. So to wrap up, this is what I call the identity credo, and it is a framework for living and certainly a framework for career success. I am alive, I am unique, and I am immutable, even as I grow and evolve. To truly live, however, I must express myself fully, and in this regard have much to give. But to do so, I need others, and am most productive with those who need me in return. To establish these relationships, I must first be known for who I am, and it follows then that I will receive in accordance with what I give. Thank you all very much. I hope this has been helpful, interesting, provocative, and thought-provoking. And I'm more than happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much for walking us through those, especially those 8 questions. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and we do have a couple questions that have already come in for all those on the webinar. If you hover over either the top or bottom of your screen, you're going to see a little Q&A icon. You can submit your questions in those Q&A boxes. So our first question here is from Susan, and she says that identity is something that I'm very focused focused on because I'm about to head into a busy few months of professional networking at various conferences. Any tips that help me feel less vulnerable in opening up in the conference social, in that social setting, that will lead to a meaningful interaction and connection? How do I share my identity in these quick interactions?
I love that question. That's great. Number one, Susan, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, we cannot talk per se, but I'm assuming that you have a clear sense of who you are, that you can articulate it in, if you will, 10 words or less. That's job one, that you can put it into words that you believe in, and that will be a bit provocative, and that will get people. What you really want to do in that setting, in that networking setting, is to get people to say, that's interesting, tell me more. Those are the three magic words. Tell me more. Another way to ice break, if you will, in networking situations where you want to introduce a deeper sense of yourself than just, here's what I do, is to ask people what they're passionate about. I do this a lot. And I do that without asking, what do you do? I'll meet somebody and I'll say, genuinely, what are you passionate about? And the light goes on in the eyes every time. And once you introduce the question, what are you passionate about? Then you have an opportunity to tell them what you're passionate about, which you can do through the lens of your identity. I am passionate about helping people to see. Man, I love it. Oh, well, tell me more about that. Okay, well, we've just opened the door into an identity conversation and not just a job conversation. So those are two ideas I would offer, and I hope they're helpful. And the third thing is trust yourself. Have faith in yourself. Believe in yourself as you do this. Thank you.
Great. And one other question that I wanted to touch on that wasn't necessarily within the scope of this presentation, but certainly speaks to your expertise in this area is identifying an organization's identity, especially if you're applying to jobs and you're trying to determine if an organization has an identity that's aligned with yours.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you would suggest someone go about trying to understand an organization's identity if they don't know someone who works there?
Absolutely. It's a wonderful question. It's a really important question. And the answer is I can bring you up to a certain percentage way to do this, but it's rare. So the first thing you do in your pre, interview, research, homework, whatever, is you find out what the, I don't care what you call it, what the mission of the company is, what its purpose is, what its brand promise is, what its vision is, any of those things. Any or all of those things will, in fact, give you a clue about where this, what the company stands for. It may not at all, I hate to say this, man, it may not at all relate to the essential identity of the organization, because that takes work to understand. But it will give you a hint. And if you're talking to a company that has none of those, or that, says that their mission or their vision, not their vision, their purpose is to, enhance stakeholder or shareholder value, run the other way. This is not a company you want to work for, unless the only thing you want to do is make money. The other way I think you can begin to poke at the identity, organizational identity question, and it's a great exercise, is when you go in for your interview, first interview, second interview, ask the people you're talking to, and don't be afraid to use a little definition from this discussion about, well, what is the identity of this? What is the identity of XYZ company? Tell me about that. How does it really create value in the world? Wow. I love this conversation, because that's going to, get the guy across the table from you to go, holy mackerel. That's a really interesting question. Maybe they'll have an answer for you. Maybe they won't, but they will never forget you for asking it. So that's what I would suggest.
Great. And we have another question here from Rose. She says, when you're doing these workshops with younger folks, maybe in their 20s, what happens if they draw blanks and are unable to define the things that they love? Or if they put the list of their 7 life milestones and they're unable to see the patterns? Would you have any advice for someone who's maybe just starting out and really doesn't have a lot of data in the career world, but that they might be able to use to inform
Sure.
their identity moving forward?
Absolutely. First of all, I love working with young people. I mean, 20s, late teens, 20s. Oh, I love it. And by the way, everybody's got enough data by the time you're 20. I mean, I've done this with kids who are 14 and 15 years old. And I can coax out of them information that is meaningful and useful. So don't ever think you don't have enough information. I mean, again, very hard to do if I'm not working with a group or an individual, or you're not working with, say, a coach who knows my work and will do that, help folks do it, but it is eminently doable. And if I can, I will make one, this is an unintended plug, but it's going to help you. On my website, if you go to the section on identity in your life or identity-based living. At the bottom, if you scroll down that page, you'll see a whole bunch of tools. There's a product called the Identity Discovery Deck. And there's one for adults and there's one for teens, for youth. And that's a tool that can be used and is used very effectively to help young people begin to get into this stuff without, trying to boil the ocean. So I'll quit there, but there are many ways to do it, and don't ever think that an individual doesn't have enough information to work with, because they do.
All right, thank you. Thank you for sharing that resource as well. I'm sure a lot of folks will be making their way over to your website. And again, the website's listed right there on the screen. So here's a comment and a question from Diane. She says, the newspaper I worked at changed identity in a drastic way. And before that happened, she loved everything about the placement. It balanced her passions with great opportunity. And so she was faced with a choice of whether to stick with the newspaper, or she had the opportunity to go work at a startup. That the guaranteed compensation wasn't necessarily the same, but it was this moldable new opportunity on the table. So she asks, is this a wise investment of time and talents to think about making a jump if you feel your organization has shifted in its identity? And how do you balance the risk of the unknown?
Okay. So if I hear you correctly, it was a newspaper. Is that right, Dan? It was.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. That the identity of the institution shifted, I assume, significantly. Mm-hmm. Not nominally, but a lot. And I don't know what happened. Maybe somebody bought it. Maybe a new publisher came in, a new managing editor, whatever. Something changed that you did not like, and that upset you, and that made you feel uncomfortable and, in a sense, disassociate with it. So, on one hand, I'm sorry to hear that happened. On the other hand, I applaud you for your self-awareness and the courage it took to understand that and embrace it and make a change. I think the worst thing you can do is stay in an organization that no longer aligns with your identity and your values and the things that matter to you. Why on earth would you want to do that? That hurts. It hurts. So going to another place, I think, makes great sense. I can't judge whether the place you're talking about necessarily is the right fit for you. But if you seem to be what I'll call identity aware, and I'm sure you can have, think about whether this place is going to satisfy that itch or not. And the other thing you can do, if it's a startup, obviously it's small, is you can have conversations with whoever hired you and your colleagues and talk about identity issues with them. You know, in startups, I've not worked for many. I've worked for a couple, but they're big startups. This is a great time to talk about identity when things are malleable and shaping and formative. It could be a great conversation. So that would be my suggestion.
Great. And we have another question here. This comes from Francis. It seems there's a disparity between what I want as a career and what I think I'm good at. How would you encourage someone to reconcile those two things?
Well, I wish I knew that what those two things were. It would be easier. Say it one more time, Dan.
So there's a disparity between what I want as a career and what I think I'm good at.
Okay. So let me go slow with this one because I want to get it right.
Sure.
What you want as a career, I don't know what that is, which makes this hard. And there's a difference between that and what you believe you are good at.
Yeah, so maybe just to put in a placeholder, let's say I want a career in marketing, but I'm a really good salesperson and I'm making a living in sales. So how would you encourage someone to reconcile those two things?
Well, those aren't that far apart. I mean, those are close cousins, you know?
Yeah.
And anybody who's really good at sales but wants to be in marketing, I mean, that just to respond to that's low-hanging fruit. You can take courses in marketing, you can transfer skills. You'll be a better marketing executive, frankly, having been in sales than you would be having not had that experience. So that's a quick response to that one, and that helps to understand the circumstance. I think you have to ask yourself what it is you want, what it is you think you're good at, and what the career options around that might be. And I appreciate this is a kind of an abstract conversation because I just don't have the information I'd like to have. But you know, what you're really good at has implications beyond what you think it may. You know, if I were you, I would sit down with a piece of paper or at your computer, whatever, and give yourself an opportunity to seriously think about what the career options might be, whether or not you ever want to follow them. But just sort of vent a little bit around that and see what emerges. And then the other part of that was what you want as a career. And in that context, I guess I would say try to understand if there's anything in that career arena that could benefit from what you feel you're good at. I mean, there's often always some connection there, and I'm afraid that's the best I can do without having, you know, more information.
Absolutely. And again, there are a couple questions coming in that are very specific to individuals. So I'd just like to, you know, if we don't get to all the questions today, certainly reach out. You can find Larry's contact information on the screen.
Sure.
But here's a question coming in. How do you lead a team that has very different individual identities? For example, a team that may have a creative advocate person, but also a quiet, compassionate person. Do you know how to advise someone who's in that leadership position to really bring those identities together?
Actually, yeah, identity-based work is great in team development. One of the folks who I've certified in my work does a lot of this in Microsoft, and if I'm making it, let's say I have 6 people on a team. Obviously, they're all individuals. You know, there's no homogeneous group of people. We're all different. And if you take each team member, if you were to take that identity discovery deck I told you about, obviously adult version, and take your team through it together as an exercise. The idea of having one person who's sort of quiet and compassionate and somebody else who's outspoken, that's not identity. That's personality. And the best teams, again, understand, and please remember this. If you remember nothing else, identity is how you create value in the world, how you create value in the world, how you make a unique contribution. Identity is your bridge to the world. So if you understand it through that lens and you take a team through the identity discovery process, which you can do in a day, you can do it in half a day, everybody on that team is going to learn something new about themselves. And now what you've got are 5 or 6 or 4 or 10 individuals who, when you combine their contributions, are going to, by definition, make a better team. And it has nothing to do with personality. It has to do with value creation.
All right, that's great. And I have one more question here as we approach the top of the hour.
Sure.
One of the things you mentioned is really weaving in your identity and placing it at the forefront of all the materials that we create when we're going out and looking for a new job, especially. So to take one as an example, can you talk a little bit more about how you would encourage folks to incorporate their identity into their LinkedIn profile, something that I think a lot of people are very familiar with, but is it something that you put forward in the headline that you craft? Is it something that you put forward in, the blurb about each position you've held? How do you encourage people to do that?
Okay. So the place on LinkedIn where you can do this the best is in your summary, in your profile, how you introduce yourself to the world on your front page, whatever you want to call it, the summary. You can go look at mine, go look at my LinkedIn page. The worst thing you can do on LinkedIn is sound like a resume. I mean, who cares? All that information is available elsewhere. Communicate with the world in a conversational way. Tell them who you are, what matters to you, what you've done that's been, meaningful, not just significant, but meaningful. Speak like a human. I mean, there's just not enough of that out there on LinkedIn. In fact, in so many contexts. Again, I'm going to do this one more time because it might be useful to some of you. On my website, under identity-based living, at the bottom where you will find that the card deck stuff, you will also find a workbook called Job Search Workbook, where I've actually developed a workbook for people who want to bring their identity outputs, results, into all the things I cited, resumes, LinkedIn profiles, interviews, all that stuff, cover letters. Here's how you do it, before and after. So if anybody's interested, that's there as well. The two go hand in hand, the deck and the workbook. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to say anything. I care about people doing good work in this world. I care that you do what you love and you make a contribution that people will really appreciate. And that's why I do what I do.
All right. Well, I think that's a great point to close on. I want to thank you again, Larry, for offering your expertise, your perspective on this topic. We had a lot of really great questions. I wish we had gotten to them all. But again, if you have a question that wasn't addressed, I'd certainly invite you to reach out to Larry, visit his website, take a look at some of the materials he's been talking about. And again, Larry, just thank you on behalf of the entire Alumni Association for being with us today.
Thank you, Dan. I've enjoyed it very much.
And my thanks also go out to all of our guests for participating today. And I specifically want to thank those of you who have donated to BU in the past. We have a terrific slate of webinars coming up in the month of, throughout the rest of the month of March as part of Alumni Career Weeks 2019. And I'd encourage all of you to visit our website, bu.edu/careerweeks, to sign up for those sessions and to see the full schedule of opportunities coming up for all BU alumni. As always, if you or any BU alumni would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar, or if you have a topic you'd like to showcase for the Alumni Association, please feel free to contact me in the Alumni Relations Office or by email at dangard, D-A-N-G-A-R-D, at bu.edu. Thanks again, everyone, for your time, and I hope you have a great day or a great evening, wherever you may be. Thanks, Larry.
You're welcome.